A young woman vanished from her home in the middle of the night, leaving behind all of her belongings. As soon as police began their investigation, they found themselves in what felt like a real-life horror movie. With each passing day, more disturbing and unexpected details came to light, slowly revealing a chilling picture until the terrifying truth was finally uncovered. Ellen Wake was born on May 17, 1995, in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Later on, she moved with her parents and sister to Ohio, where the family settled in Westchester Township. From a young age, Ellie stood out for her creativity. She loved making little crafts and decorations out of anything she could find. She also had a thing for bright, quirky clothes that always made her stand out from the crowd. She felt most at peace in nature, climbing trees, stringing up a hammock, and just soaking in the quiet. She could spend hours like that. After finishing high school, Ellie went to a local college and got her cosmetology license. Not long after, she landed a job as a hairdresser. By the summer of 2018, 23-year-old Ellie was living on her own and still working at the hair salon. On Sunday, July 29th, a friend came over to visit her. They hung out in the backyard for a while, chatted, and then he left. After that, Ellie texted with a few of her friends. But the next day, she suddenly stopped replying. Her family and friends kept trying to reach her, but there was no response. When they called, they realized her phone had been turned off. A little while later, Ellie's mom drove over to her house and saw her car still parked by the garage. All of her personal belongings were inside, except for her phone. It didn't make any sense, and Ellie's mom immediately went to the police. She also told them right away that she had a strong suspicion about who might be behind her daughter's disappearance. Ellie had told her multiple times about an anonymous man who had been stalking her for months. It all started in February 2018, about 6 months before Ellie disappeared. A strange man began messaging her on social media, and at first he seemed harmless. But then his messages started getting creepier. He asked her bizarre questions about her thoughts on mass murders, and just generally acted weird. Ellie tried blocking him, but every time she did, he'd pop back up with a new account under a different name, or message her through a different platform entirely. But that was just the beginning. In April, Ellie received a video from him, filmed late at night through one of her windows. In the clip, she was in her kitchen, quietly putting stickers into a scrapbook. Judging by the angle, the video had been shot from less than a yard away from the window. But that wasn't even the worst part. Whoever was behind the camera was naked and pleasuring himself while filming her. After that, he sent more photos and videos just like it. Ellie was terrified. This man wasn't just stalking her online, he was trespassing on her property. Somehow, he had found out where she lived, even though she had never shared her address publicly. Eventually, she went to the police and gave them everything she had: his accounts, the messages, and those disturbing videos he'd filmed right outside her house. But the local department's response was, to put it mildly, underwhelming. Instead of opening a case under a statute that recognized Ellie was in real danger, they brushed it off as simple telephone harassment. Investigators did try to figure out who was behind the fake accounts, but they quickly hit a wall. It turned out the man had been using virtual phone numbers from a website that required a court order to release any user information. And apparently, the police didn't feel like jumping through those hoops, so they shelved the case. They didn't even attach the photos or videos he'd taken through Ellie's window to the file, even though that was a clear violation of the law. In the end, the only advice they gave her was to avoid going out after dark, keep her curtains closed, and maybe take a self-defense class. Ellie was devastated by the fact that the police had done virtually nothing and started to feel completely powerless in the face of what was happening. She told all her friends and family about the situation, and none of them could understand why the police were just standing by. Meanwhile, the messages from her stalker kept coming, no matter how many times Ellie tried to cut off contact. Eventually, the constant stress pushed her into serious anxiety and depression. She couldn't focus on anything except the fear this man had instilled in her, and the lack of support from law enforcement only made things worse. Her mom also tried reaching out to the police. They did send a patrol car, but the officer simply drove down the street, stayed for about 5 minutes, and then left. Things continued like this until May. One day, while Ellie was talking to a friend about the whole situation, he managed to trace one of the stalker's fake Snapchat accounts back to a real social media profile. It turned out the account belonged to a man named Michael Strauss. Ellie immediately recognized this name. They had briefly dated when she was 17, but hadn't really kept in touch since then. As soon as she realized who was behind it all, Ellie went back to the police. But, as expected, they still didn't take any real action. They never questioned Michael, never warned him, and basically did nothing to protect her. So once again, Ellie was left completely unprotected. Even knowing her stalker's identity didn't change a thing. And the messages didn't stop. In fact, they got worse. Michael started sending direct threats. Ellie became terrified of staying home alone, so her friends took turns spending the night at her place. But on the day she stopped responding to messages, no one had been able to stay over. She had asked the same friend who had come by earlier that day, but he was dealing with a bad toothache and didn't want to be a burden, thinking he wouldn't be able to sleep anyway. Now that Ellie had vanished, the police finally got to work and started by looking into her phone activity. They discovered that her phone stayed in the house until around 3 a.m. and then it was turned off. Investigators also got access to her social media accounts and found that shortly before she disappeared, Ellie had been messaging with someone named Nate. She'd asked him to come over and he agreed. He also mentioned that he wouldn't be bringing his phone and said he'd just knock on the door when he got there. But according to the messages, Ellie later canceled those plans. Still, when detectives started digging into Nate's account, they uncovered a disturbing twist. It was registered to a virtual phone number from the same website the stalker had used. Ellie's friends also told police that she had been talking to Nate for about 6 months, but had never actually met him in person. Based on all this, investigators suspected that Nate never existed, and it had been the stalker all along. What made it even worse was that Ellie had told him she was home by herself. Soon after, detectives got a warrant and requested all the data linked to the stalker's fake accounts. As expected, everything pointed directly to Michael Strauss. And notably, all those fake accounts went completely silent the same night Ellie disappeared. Detectives started digging into Michael's background, and what they found was alarming. He had a lengthy criminal record that included burglary, public indecency, harassment, and fraud. After one arrest, he'd even been ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation, which resulted in a court-mandated year of counseling. But despite everything he'd done, Michael had never spent a single day behind bars. Police paid him a visit, hoping to get some answers, but Michael denied everything, and they left empty-handed. A few days later, though, investigators secured a warrant and searched his home, seizing all of his devices. The analysis revealed that Michael's phone had pinged near Ellie's house on the night she disappeared. They also found proof that he was behind the fake accounts. In fact, just 53 minutes after Ellie's phone had gone dark, Michael created a brand new account and began messaging a different woman, once again posing as an anonymous stalker. Inside his house, officers made even more disturbing discoveries. They found Ellie's driver's license, a clump of her hair, and a stone from the necklace she always wore. They also found a pair of real handcuffs bolted to his bed. And that wasn't all. A deeper look into Michael's online activity revealed some truly chilling details. For months before Ellie vanished, he had searched, "How long does a human body smell?" 3 weeks before, he was looking up cases of missing women in the area. A week later, he Googled how to survive in prison. He also repeatedly searched for Ellie's social media profiles and checked out pages of local businesses near her home. Just 10 hours before she went missing, Michael read an article about a serial killer known as the Cincinnati Strangler. A few days later, he looked up another serial killer, then searched how to delete photos from items. At that point, the evidence was overwhelming. Everything pointed to Michael's involvement in Ellie's disappearance, and detectives were almost certain she was no longer alive. But they still didn't know where her body was, until they discovered something interesting. On Michael's phone, investigators also found a screenshot from Google Maps. It showed an open field not far from his house. Cell tower data also confirmed that his phone had been in that area on the night Ellie vanished. So police headed out there with search dogs, and it didn't take long for them to find human remains, hidden deep in the tall grass. By then, nearly a month had passed since Ellie went missing and the body was in an advanced state of decomposition. Still, forensic experts were able to confirm her identity through dental records. It was Ellie. As for her cause of death, the level of decomposition made it hard to say for sure. There were no obvious signs of trauma, but the evidence suggested she may have been strangled. On top of that, Michael had specifically researched serial killers who used strangulation as their method of killing, so detectives believed it was a strong possibility. Right after that, Michael was arrested and brought in for questioning. This time, he changed his story, admitting that he had killed Ellie. But the version he gave was just bizarre. According to Michael, Ellie had actually agreed to film a disturbing adult video with him, something involving torture, which he planned to sell to one of his regular clients for a hefty payout. But during the shoot, he claimed things spiraled out of control. He said he didn't realize how much force he was using and ended up accidentally strangling her. Michael also claimed that the entire thing was caught on camera. After realizing Ellie was dead, he said he watched the footage and then tossed the memory card. Naturally, detectives didn't believe a word of it. His story didn't match the facts, and with the mountain of evidence against him, prosecutors were already in a strong position to secure a conviction. Based on everything they'd gathered, the most likely scenario was that Michael lured Ellie out of her house, possibly by threatening her, and then brought her back to his place. Forensic experts confirmed that her wrists had been bound with zip ties. Once inside, Michael handcuffed her to his bed and killed her, then later dumped her body in a field near his home. But investigators still had another big question to answer. Could Michael be connected to any other crimes? Because aside from the overwhelming amount of evidence in Ellie's case, his devices revealed something else. Dozens of photos and videos of random women, most of them jogging in local parks or walking alone. In many of the clips, Michael was either secretly filming them from his car or following them on foot with a hidden camera. When detectives asked about the footage, Michael didn't deny anything. He admitted he liked recording attractive women whenever he got the chance, but insisted he never actually hurt anyone. Still, the search history on his phone told a darker story. He'd looked up things like, "Where do women jog in Westchester?" and would also search for news about attacks on female joggers in the area. Police started digging into other unsolved cases in the area and soon came across one that closely matched Michael's pattern. About 6 months before Ellie's murder, a woman was attacked while jogging in a nearby town called Mason. An unknown man ran up behind her and tried to drag her into the woods, but she managed to fight him off and escape. What stood out was that Michael had Googled this exact case multiple times, according to his search history, so detectives were nearly certain he was responsible. But without physical evidence, they couldn't charge him. They also began to wonder if Michael could be linked to another unsolved murder from back in 2011, the killing of 21-year-old college student Caitlin Markham, whose story we've already covered on this channel. She disappeared under eerily similar circumstances, and her body was found nearly 2 years later. Police have never identified a suspect, but now they started to seriously consider Michael. Digging deeper, they found out that Caitlin had told friends about being stalked by a man she didn't know. But then came a truly unexpected lead. On one of Michael's old social media pages, police found a photo from a music festival. He was standing with a group of people, and one of them was Caitlin's fiancé. That confirmed Michael at least knew someone close to the victim. But despite this connection, investigators couldn't find anything concrete to link him to Caitlin's case. While Michael was sitting in jail awaiting trial for Ellie's murder, one of his cellmates came forward with a tip. He claimed that Michael had confessed to killing another woman named Shelley and said he'd hidden her body near a river. But despite looking into the story, detectives weren't able to find any unsolved cases that matched the details the cellmate had given them. So, even though there were plenty of suspicious threads tying Michael to other possible crimes, he was never formally charged with anything beyond Ellie's case. When the case finally went to trial, the prosecution laid out a strong lineup of evidence pointing straight to Michael. They argued that the murder wasn't some tragic accident. It was planned, and there was no question about who was behind it. Meanwhile, Michael's defense attorney had nothing substantial to offer in his client's favor. So instead, he tried to blame Ellie for what happened to her. He told the jury that Ellie struggled with anxiety and depression and took some medication for it, suggesting that the pills might have caused her death. Needless to say, it was a ridiculous claim. Prosecutors quickly shut that down, making it clear that Ellie's health had nothing to do with the fact that she was abducted from her own home and murdered. Even with a mountain of evidence stacked against Michael, the prosecution eventually offered him a plea deal. Maybe they were worried that, without something concrete like DNA evidence, the jury might hesitate and Michael could end up walking free. 2.5 years after Ellie's death, Michael finally took the deal and pleaded guilty in front of a judge. He showed up to the hearing with visible bruises, likely from fellow inmates, and gave a short statement. He claimed he never meant to kill anyone and said he regretted what he'd done. He also apologized to Ellie's family, who were present in the courtroom, and even managed to squeeze out a few tears. But because of the plea deal, the judge found himself in a tough spot. 6 of the 9 charges had to be dropped, which significantly impacted the sentence, so Michael was given life in prison with the possibility of parole after 17.5 years. As unfair as that may sound, it doesn't guarantee he'll ever be released. The parole board can, and likely will, deny his release for decades. In a surprising moment, even Michael's own mother spoke during the hearing, urging the court to give her son the harshest sentence possible. So, the man responsible for Ellie's murder ended up behind bars, but that brought little comfort to her friends and family. Everyone close to her understood that it wasn't just Michael's actions that led to her death. It was also the complete inaction of the police. They had multiple chances to intervene and protect her, but failed every time. After her murder, the local police department launched an internal investigation. As a result, the officer who took Ellie's initial stalking report was suspended for just 40 unpaid hours. One final note, the case of Caitlin Markham, the one where Michael was once considered a possible suspect, was finally solved in 2023. It turned out the killer was Caitlin's fiancé, who had managed to stay under the radar for years. The fact that he was friends with Michael, and that both of them turned out to be violent predators, raises a chilling question. Did they know about each other's crimes? Or worse, were they committing some of them together? We'll leave a link to Caitlin's case in the description of this video. Share your thoughts in the comment section and don't forget to press the like button if you appreciate my video. A young woman didn't show up for her shift at the store, and right away, her coworkers knew something was wrong. When police got involved, it seemed like the case would be pretty straightforward. But days turned into weeks, and no matter what they tried, they couldn't get any closer to justice. Then, out of nowhere, they got a phone call, a shocking twist that no one saw coming, and one that finally revealed the truth. Amber Belkin was born on December 6, 1981, in San Antonio, Texas. She was an only child, which meant her parents gave her all the love and attention in the world. From a young age, Amber had a huge heart for animals. She was always bringing home strays, not just cats and dogs, but turtles, frogs, pretty much anything she could find, and her parents actually let her keep them. Over time, she decided she wanted to become a veterinarian, and after graduating high school, her plan was to go to college. But first, she figured she'd save up some money, so she got a job at a video game store. Amber quickly proved herself to be reliable and hardworking, and before long, she was promoted to store manager. She held that position for about 3 years, and in 2007, when she was 25, she finally signed up for veterinary courses at the local college. On January 29th, Amber was supposed to open the store for her shift, but for some reason, she never showed up. As the manager, she was usually the first one in, but that morning, no one had heard from her. When the head office realized the store still hadn't opened, they tried calling Amber, but she didn't answer. They even tried calling the store's landline, but got nothing. So they reached out to a nearby location and asked one of the employees to swing by and check things out. An employee named Giovanni agreed to head over and see what was going on. When he got there, the store was completely dark. The doors were locked, the lights were off, and it looked like no one was inside. He walked around the building, peeked through the windows, but didn't see anything unusual and left. After that, he let management know what he saw. They kept trying to get in touch with Amber, but there was still no response. Hours went by with no sign of her, and around noon, corporate called the other store again and asked Giovanni to go back for another check. Giovanni showed up at the store again, but this time, something was different. The lights were still off and the doors were locked, but when he looked through the window, he saw someone inside. It was another coworker named Brandon. Brandon let him in, and right away, Giovanni noticed the place was a mess. Game boxes and other stuff were scattered all over the floor. The register was open and there was cash tossed around the counter. It looked like the store had been robbed, but strangely, Brandon was acting like he didn't even notice the chaos. Giovanni headed to the manager's office to check the safe, where the cash from the night before was usually stored. But as soon as he opened the door, he froze. Right there on the floor was a body with a plastic bag pulled tightly over the head. Giovanni called the police right away, and officers were soon on the scene. It didn't take long for investigators to confirm that the victim was Amber. After looking around the store, they came to what seemed like the obvious conclusion. She'd been killed during a robbery. The cash register was wide open, and the safe in the office had been completely cleaned out. Amber's car was still in the parking lot just outside. The doors were unlocked and her cell phone was sitting on the seat. That raised even more questions. Why would she leave her car wide open with all her stuff inside? Another thing that didn't add up was how the killer actually left the building. Both doors had been locked when Giovanni showed up earlier that morning. With the help of other employees, detectives figured out that the suspect had taken more than just the cash. They'd also stolen around 50 video game discs, an Xbox, and a few PlayStations, totaling roughly $6,000. While police were putting the pieces together, the medical examiner determined that Amber had died from asphyxiation. It looked like the killer used a plastic bag and held it over her head until she stopped breathing. Experts believed the struggle lasted several minutes, and through it all, Amber fought with everything she had, but couldn't break free. They also discovered that her hands had been bound with duct tape at some point, but the killer had likely removed it after she died. Detectives spoke with Amber's co-workers and learned that she usually arrived at the store around 9 a.m., an hour before opening. Her routine was to collect the cash from the safe and take it to the bank before getting the store ready for the day. Based on what they knew, Amber had shown up right on schedule that morning, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. Investigators believe the killer attacked her almost immediately before she had the chance to grab the money. Soon, detectives got another valuable lead. The manager of a different store in the same chain said he'd spoken with Amber on the phone that morning. They talked just a few minutes after she arrived at work, but the call didn't last long. Amber suddenly said she had to go and hung up. The more information police uncovered, the more it started to look like this was something bigger than just a random robbery. For one thing, the level of violence used didn't make much sense. Amber had apparently opened both the register and the safe, so the killer didn't need to hurt her to get the money. And if the goal was to silence her to avoid getting caught, that didn't quite track either. In most cases like this, robbers use a gun or a knife. Strangulation, on the other hand, often suggests something personal. On top of that, detectives believe the killer may have come in through the back door, which raised another red flag. That door opened into an alley filled with identical doors to other businesses. So, unless you were familiar with the building, there was no easy way to know which door led where. Putting all of this together, police started to suspect the killer may have had a personal motive and possibly even worked at the store. The robbery, they now believed, might have been staged to cover up what was really a targeted murder. Still, detectives didn't have a single piece of physical evidence to go on. This particular store didn't have any surveillance cameras, unlike every other location in the chain. And when crime scene techs combed through the place, they didn't find any useful fingerprints or DNA on the bag or Everest body. But by the time police had pieced all of that together, they already had a suspect. Brandon. As you might remember, he's the one Giovanni saw inside the store during his second visit. Brandon was standing there in the dark, with the door still locked, acting like the mess in the open register didn't even exist. He also told police he hadn't gone into the manager's office and didn't see Amber's body. According to Brandon, he showed up for his shift just minutes before Giovanni got there. When he saw the lights off and the store still locked, he figured he must have gotten the schedule wrong. Maybe it was his day to open. So he let himself in and found the place a mess. But instead of being alarmed, he just assumed the crew from the night before had left it like that and started worrying he'd be the one to catch the blame. Brandon swore he had nothing to do with Amber's death, said he never saw her body and had no idea anything was wrong. But detectives weren't ready to just take his word for it. He knew the building inside and out, knew there were no cameras, and on top of that, they'd found something else, a possible motive. Amber's family and other co-workers told police she had complained about Brandon multiple times. He was her assistant, and according to Amber, he constantly slacked off and didn't take his job seriously. Things got so bad. She eventually decided to file an official complaint with management and even asked for him to be fired. But here's the key detail. Amber was planning to send that complaint the very morning she was killed. So yeah, Brandon had both motive and opportunity. But still, police didn't have a shred of evidence linking him to the crime. They got a warrant to search his house, his car, even his phone, and to their surprise, they found nothing. And that was odd because the killer had taken nearly 50 game discs and 4 consoles. That stuff had to be somewhere, but there was no trace of it. Not in Brandon's car, not in his apartment. Even more surprising were his phone records. Data from his cell phone provider showed that Brandon was nowhere near the store until around 2 p.m., and Amber was killed somewhere around 9 in the morning. On top of that, he claimed to have an alibi. He said he'd spent that morning helping his fiancée and her parents, and when police followed up, they all backed up his story. Even so, police still weren't ready to cross Brandon off their list. For the next few days, they double-checked his alibi and tried to figure out if there was any way he could have possibly pulled this off. Meanwhile, Amber's funeral took place, and to everyone's shock, Brandon showed up. By that point, her whole family knew he was the main suspect, so seeing him there felt like a slap in the face. But eventually, detectives confirmed that his alibi was rock solid. There was just no way he could have been at the store that morning. So, despite the red flags and the odd behavior, they had no choice but to rule him out and start looking elsewhere. They also considered Amber's boyfriend, a guy named Fred. Just minutes before her death, she had texted him, "Love you." But like Brandon, Fred had a bulletproof alibi. So once again, police were back to square one. Sometime later, investigators held a press conference with Amber's parents, asking the public to come forward with any information about the case. A massive reward of $100,000 was offered, most of it put up by the store where Amber had worked. Over the next few weeks, tips started coming in, but one by one, they all led to dead ends. So, the case slowly went cold, and as the months dragged on with no answers, detectives started to wonder if justice would ever be served. That went on for 7 months, until the case suddenly took an unexpected turn. Police got a call from a man who wanted to remain anonymous. He claimed he had some information about Amber's murder, but at first, he was vague and hesitant. Still, sometime later, he agreed to meet with detectives and share what he knew. According to this witness, the day before Amber was killed, a friend of his had suggested they pull off an easy robbery. He turned the offer down. But the next day, when he saw the news about Amber's murder, he immediately knew who was behind it, because his friend worked at the same chain. But that friend wasn't Brandon. It was Giovanni. The witness said he met up with Giovanni the day after the murder, and during their conversation, Giovanni flat out admitted to killing Amber. The man said he was stunned by the confession, but at the time, he was too scared to go to the police because he was convinced Giovanni might come after him next. What made this even more significant was that the witness knew both Giovanni and Amber. They had all worked at the same store for a while. So, Giovanni would have known there were no security cameras, and he could have easily walked through the door that morning because Amber wouldn't have thought twice about letting him in. Right after that, police brought Giovanni in for questioning, but he denied everything. He insisted he had nothing to do with Amber's murder, and no matter how hard detectives tried, they couldn't get him to crack. So, in the end, they had to let him go. With no physical evidence tying him to the crime, detectives started to wonder whether the witness's testimony alone would be enough to take this to trial. But the district attorney wasn't convinced. He told them that without something solid, there was almost no chance they could convince a jury. As a last-ditch effort, they decided to collect a DNA sample from Giovanni, hoping the pressure might shake him up. Even though they didn't have any usable biological evidence from the scene, maybe just the idea of handing over his DNA would rattle him. They got a warrant, showed up at his house, and Giovanni handed over the sample, but stuck to his story and kept claiming his innocence. Then, the next day, something else happened. Detectives found out that Giovanni had left town with his wife and kids. They'd moved to a place called Laredo, right on the border with Mexico. To the detectives, that felt like a huge red flag. But the problem was, without any hard evidence, their hands were tied. They couldn't arrest him, and now they were seriously worried he might slip across the border, where tracking him down would be a whole lot harder. Over the next few months, police kept digging for new leads, but nothing panned out. A year and a half went by, and it was starting to feel like Giovanni might never be brought to justice. But then, out of nowhere, detectives got a call that changed everything. It was June 2008, 18 months after Amber's murder, and on the other end of the line was a woman named Veronica. What immediately caught their attention was who she was, Giovanni's wife. She told detectives that at first, she never believed her husband had anything to do with Amber's death, but everything changed the day police showed up to collect his DNA. As soon as the officers left, Giovanni turned to her and said they needed to pack up and get ready to move. When she asked him what was going on, he said the cops suspected him of murder. Veronica then asked, "Did you kill someone?" And he looked her in the eyes and said, "Yes." Veronica instantly knew he was talking about Amber, but she was too scared to argue or say no. According to her, Giovanni had always been aggressive and controlling. He tracked her every move and refused to take no for an answer when it came to intimacy. If she resisted, he'd tie her up with duct tape and force himself on her. He didn't even care that their kids were asleep in the same room. They all lived in a one-bedroom apartment. She was convinced that if she ever went to the police, he'd kill her. So, she stayed quiet, moved with him, and tried to survive. But one day, she got the courage to ask him directly, "Did he kill Amber?" And Giovanni confirmed it. He also said it happened during a robbery. Veronica begged him to turn himself in, but he refused. As a result, she told him she wanted a divorce and planned to take the kids with her. In response, Giovanni said they should talk about it calmly over coffee, but instead of driving to a cafe, he took her out to the middle of nowhere, locked the car doors, and pulled out a gun. But Veronica refused. She managed to convince him that if he died and she went to prison for killing him, their two kids would lose both parents. Eventually, he calmed down and drove her back home. The next day, Giovanni took her and the kids to her mother's house, then took off. As soon as he left, Veronica called the police. With her statement in hand, the district attorney finally gave the green light for an arrest. But there was one big problem. Giovanni's exact whereabouts were unknown, and detectives believed he was already in Mexico. They contacted the U.S. Marshals, who added him to their 15 most wanted list, and began working with Mexican authorities to track him down. The process dragged on for about a month and a half, until Mexican authorities finally tracked Giovanni down at a relative's house. He was just across the U.S. border, only a few miles away, and in a cruel twist of irony, when they arrested him, he was playing one of the very games he'd stolen from the store the day Amber was killed. Under the extradition agreement between the U.S. and Mexico, bringing Giovanni back to Texas came with one condition. Prosecutors had to take the death penalty off the table. They didn't really have a choice, so they agreed. And later, they decided to offer Giovanni a plea deal, because without the death penalty, the DA didn't see much point in dragging the trial out for years. As part of the deal, Giovanni had to plead guilty in exchange for a life sentence, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He agreed and finally told his version of what happened that morning. According to him, he never meant to kill Amber. He just wanted to steal some money because he'd recently lost his job. At first, he said she did everything he asked, but at some point she tried to call for help, and that's when he killed her. But detectives didn't buy that story for a second. First off, Giovanni hadn't lost his job. He was still working at another store at the time of the murder. And second, the whole idea that he didn't plan to kill her didn't make much sense either. Amber knew who he was. Even if he'd gotten away with the robbery, She could have easily told police exactly who to look for. He also claimed that he'd felt guilty the entire time and had actually been thinking about turning himself in, but said he kept putting others' needs before his own, whatever that was supposed to mean. As part of the deal, Giovanni only had to give a partial confession, so some details about what really happened that day remain a mystery. In the end, he was sent to prison, and the earliest he'll be eligible for parole is in 2038. After the sentencing, Amber's parents made it clear they're going to fight with everything they've got to make sure he never walks free. And finally, I want to mention Brandon, the man police initially suspected of Amber's murder. For weeks, detectives treated him like a killer, and everyone around him, his family, his friends, knew he was under suspicion. Investigators even tried to pressure his fiancée into turning him in. They asked her, "How can you sleep with a murderer?" and warned her that she might be his next victim. But despite all that, police never officially told Brandon he was no longer a suspect. For a long time, he lived with the fear that he might go to prison for something he didn't do, and the people around him had no idea he'd been cleared. In the end, though, Brandon managed to rebuild his life. He got married, started a family, and in 2018, he even saved a young girl's life. At that point, he was working as a truck driver, and as he passed a drainage canal, he spotted a 13-year-old girl being swept away by the current. There'd been a heavy storm, and the canal was overflowing. She couldn't get out on her own, so Brandon ran over to help with the help of others. They brought over a ladder and the girl climbed out. She spent a few days in the hospital, but she survived, all thanks to Brandon. In the summer of 2011, 23-year-old Daylene Carlson moved from her small town in Idaho to Stockton, California. Sporty, sociable, and adventurous, Daylene enjoyed snowboarding, fishing, camping, and long walks with her dog Maddie. Daylene had decided to relocate to Stockton to move in with her aunt and cousin. She was here for one thing and one thing only, to further her career. After years and years of saving up from her various restaurant jobs, she had enrolled at San Joaquin Delta College to major in child development. And with just a few months to go before college started, Daylene was busy putting names to new faces and getting to know the area. Her cousin Cecily was always her tour guide, but on August 6, 2011, Daylene would venture out alone. Cecily had a fever, but Daylene still wanted to go out. She had made some new friends already, and ever the confident person, she was happy to go out by herself to places she was familiar with. One of those places was Finnegan's Bar and Grill, which had fast become a favorite night out for her. The 23-year-old got ready and said her goodbyes. As she shut the door, her Aunt Maggie shouted to her that she needed to be home by 3 a.m. at the absolute latest. Daylene agreed and walked off into the town. But 3 a.m. would soon come and go. Soon it was 3.30 and then 4. Maggie was still awake and texting Daylene to see if everything was okay. Hoping she had slept at a friend's house, Maggie tried to get some rest, but with every hour that ticked by without the sound of the door opening, she was waking up, tossing and turning. The sun soon rose along with everyone else's concern. If Daylene had spent the night at a friend's house, she would have found a way to charge her phone and contact people. Safe to say, sometimes you just know when you know, and something was seriously wrong. Maggie called around her daughter and niece's friends before she decided to call 911 and report Daylene as missing. And with this, just a couple of months after she moved, the 23-year-old had disappeared. Unfortunately, it was too early to file an official report, but police logged it anyway, and her family and friends started looking around the streets for her. But as it went from hot and light to cool and dark, there was no sign of her. The following morning, the police got to work. Daylene had asked Cecily to take a picture of her before she left the house, so Daylene could look at her outfit. Her dark brown hair had been down, and she was wearing a black and white vest top with ripped blue denim jeans. Armed with this, the officers started with Daylene's original plan for the evening. She was supposed to go to Finnegan's Bar and Grill with Cecily. One of the managers at Finnegan's Bar remembered her. Daylene had been there many times before, and he said she had been stood outside most of the night, but nothing had seemed out of the ordinary. Daylene had picked up a ride there with a friend, and once at the bar she bumped into her on-off boyfriend, Jacob Evangelisti. 25-year-old Jacob admitted we weren't on the best terms. I purposely got there before she did. She came up to me to talk to me. He said the couple had got into quite a big fight 4 days before. He was drunk and grabbed Dalian's arm as she tried to get away from him. He said he had heard from people that she had been talking to a mutual friend called James Cousins, and safe to say things between the pair had been far from good. Jacob said they hung out with a few friends that night, but were keeping their distance. That was until Daleen actually broke up with him. He was upset and wanted to work things out, but it seemed she was done. Jacob maintained Daleen had left the bar before him, but he didn't see if anyone was with her. His story did match with employees. However, police said both Jacob and James Cousins were persons of interest. The cameras in the building showed Daleen outside for a while smoking, before moving back inside at about 10 to 1 in the morning. There were quite a few people around, and at one point a man even put his arm around her for a moment, before walking behind her in the corridor. He was 25-year-old Jason Gilly, another mutual friend. He even lived with James Cousins. Daleen then went back outside, where she spoke to Jacob. She looked animated and was moving her arms around a lot. This matched what Jacob had said to them about having a heated conversation. She went inside again and Jacob stayed put with a friend, finishing his cigarette. 3 a.m. Finnegan's was closed and everyone had gone. Daleen had somehow left without being caught on any camera, as had Jacob, so they didn't know what time she was there until Jacob told police that Daleen had texted him saying that she was leaving the bar to go to a party at a friend's house. He then had about 12 calls from her after she left the bar. During one of the brief calls, he heard a man's voice in the background. Daleen said she was drinking at Jason's house. Jason was Jason Gilly, who lived with James Cousins. Jason was the man seen putting his arm around Daleen and Finnegan's. In one text early in the morning, Daleen asked Jacob if she could go to his house later, and he had agreed. But hours passed and he didn't hear anything else, falling asleep and waking up to nothing more on his phone. Police next wanted to talk to Jason Gilly and James Cousins. Jason Gilly shared the house with his mom, grandma, and James, who was also staying there too. James was pretty upfront and to the point. Yes, he and Daleen had been chatting, but nothing was official and they weren't in a relationship. He was also quickly able to prove that he was out of Stockton on a trip, something corroborated by multiple people. Jason Gilly also said he couldn't help the police. He said the pair had parted ways at the bar. He had offered her a lift home, but had to leave without her at 1 a.m. because his grandmother had texted him that his young son was sick. But Jacob said Daleen told him she was drinking at Jason Gilly's house. His grandma said Jason had arrived back home himself at about 1:30 a.m. Jason then pointed the detectives back to Jacob and the fight he and Daleen had had. He actually had witnessed the whole thing and said it was pretty bad. So police were really no further forward. Also new tonight, the search is intensifying for a Stockton woman who mysteriously disappeared after a night out. 23-year-old Daleen Carlson was last seen on August 7th. At the start of this case, 3 men talked to police and said they had contact with Carlson the night she disappeared. "We just want her home safe." Carlson's cousins held a flyer displaying her photos today. The family has been fraught with worry since Carlson disappeared last weekend. She was last seen at Finnegan's Pub and Grill very early last Sunday morning. I just want my family to, have peace and get my aunt, get her daughter home. We hope. There's a hope that we would love to find her safe. But as time progresses, it looks more grim. For now, investigators plan to be here all afternoon, and we're told that Carlson moved here from Idaho to start a new life. She had plans to attend Delta College and was living with family when she disappeared. Meanwhile, family and friends were working hard to raise some money, managing to get $1,000 together to add to the Crime Stoppers' already $1,000 reward for information. A local semi-pro football team wanted to host a game and raffle to raise more money, and everyone was out giving out flyers and searching. But things were really not looking good. Friends said having to talk your brain out of every single possible scenario is exhausting and scary. That not knowing, trying to connect the dots that may or may not exist, creating lines to read in between, to maybe figure something out, is all-consuming. But when someone is missing, your mind is constantly going at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Unfortunately, investigators had exhausted all of their leads from Finnegan's, so they had to move elsewhere. Going from business to business in the area asking for any and all camera footage, they finally got a lead from a 24-hour food for less store. At 1:30 a.m., the camera showed Daleen and a man buying some alcohol in there. It was Jason Gilly, the same man that had told them he had left her at the bar and hadn't seen her since. The police took him in for questioning a second time because now he had been caught in a pretty big lie, but they gave him a chance to come clean. "What time did you get home?" "About 1:20, 1:30. When he confirmed his original story of being home at 1:30 a.m., they showed him the CCTV footage. "We know a lot more." Jason then suddenly remembered that he had gone to buy some Jaeger with Daleen at Food for Less, but he said he had dropped her back off at Finnegan's before heading home. Detectives could tell there was definitely more to his story, and as they pressed him more, he started getting teary. He admitted that they had gone to his house, where they had had consensual sex. But he said she was angry after and seemed to regret sleeping with him, so she decided to walk home. He followed her in his car, picked her up and drove her 40 miles south, dropping her off at a random place at her request and then getting gas. He said he felt horrible about his decision, and as the days passed, the more worried he became. Knowing he was seemingly the last person to see her, he had lied to protect himself. The police felt in their guts that Daleen was dead, and they bluntly came out and asked Jason where her body was. "Where are we going to find her body? Help us find her. Help us bring her home. Her family deserves it. Do you have it for her? She has a passion, is there? I know that she does. Do her. Jason, don't do this. Please, really." It was here, just as they felt they might be getting somewhere, Jason asked for a lawyer. Investigators arrested 25-year-old Jason Gilly for kidnapping and holding Daleen against her will. They did not have enough for a murder charge. Jason was denying everything. His mom was adamant that he was innocent, and Jason's family would then say that in fact Daleen was at the house with Jason, but she left alive and well Sunday morning. Another contradiction. Although Jason was now the only suspect in her disappearance, he walked out of custody after prosecutors said there wasn't enough evidence to press charges against him for kidnap. The prosecutor said it doesn't matter how strong your gut is, you have to be able to prove something. So the police needed more. They needed to find Aileen. Once out of jail, Jason said he had basically been caught up in a bad situation, but he was not a bad person. It was wrong place, wrong time, and yes, it looked a certain way, but it didn't mean it was that way. Gilly told KCRA3 earlier this week that Carlson was at his home in those early morning hours Sunday, but left on her own. He spoke to the media and said, "It's been a rough few days. I'm trying to recuperate right now. I hope they find her okay. I wish they would find the facts first before they arrest somebody. They've been interrogating my mom, my grandma, everybody. All fingers are pointing at me, I understand. Why would I be charged with kidnapping when I'm totally not that person? I'd never hurt myself or anybody. Everybody that knows me knows that." CCTV from a 7-Eleven showed that at 11 a.m. the following morning, he had topped up the gas in his car. Whilst in the 7-Eleven, he was seen wiping his arms and shirt, and further enhancement on the footage showed he was covered in dirt. They then focused their attention on searching new areas, including parts of the Calaveras River, commonly used as a dumping ground for all kinds of things. This area was particularly muddy and overgrown, and it was just a few blocks from Jason's house. Boston police out on the Calaveras River searching for any signs of a woman who disappeared more than a week and a half ago. This is exclusive video from Livecopter 3 HD right over the search. 23-year-old Daleen Carlson hasn't been seen or heard from since August 7th. Police aren't saying at this point what led them to the Calaveras River. The search is taking place just north of the University of Pacific campus, that location just about 2 miles from the Food for Lust grocery store where she was last seen, and just 2 blocks from the home of a man who was initially arrested in her disappearance. 25-year-old Jason Kelly, of course, remember, was arrested this week. He was arrested on Monday on charges of false imprisonment and kidnapping. Now, he was released again on Wednesday afternoon, but police say he's still a person of interest. Newly released documents show that police believe Jason Gilly has been lying to them since the first time they questioned him. The documents show that Gilly first told officers he wasn't with Daylene Carlson the night she disappeared. But former boyfriend Jacob Evangelista told police that at 5 Sunday morning, he received a text message. Daylene said she was at Jason's house drinking, but that she would be leaving soon to come to his house. This was the last time Jacob has seen or spoken with Daylene. Gilly later said he and Daylene went to his home, had sex, and then an argument ensued, but he gave her a ride. The report states that Jason got on the Crosstown Freeway and then south on Highway 99 for approximately 40 minutes until stopping at an unknown location where he claims he let Daylene out of the car. And for the first time, we are hearing Daylene's phone send a text message late Sunday morning. At about November 25th Sunday morning, Gilly's roommate received a text saying Daylene said she was somewhere on Country Club and that her phone was dying. James said he did not know if it was Daylene that was sending these messages, only that they were coming from her phone. The text message is just that. It's texts that come to you, but who's sending that? Could be sent from anybody. Anybody could have had control of that phone and been sending those messages. Search for Daylene Carlson has now lasted more than 7 weeks. Here's a look back. Daylene was last seen August 7th leaving Finnegan's Pub. Then August 15th, police arrested 25-year-old Jason Gilly, who was seen leaving with Carlson the night she disappeared. 2 days later, Gilly was released after the DA decided not to file criminal charges because of lack of evidence. And then on August 18th, search crews looking for Daylene found a flip-flop that may have belonged to her in the Calaveras River. 2 months after she went missing, a farm worker in a cornfield would find Daylene. Her body was so badly decomposed, it was virtually just her skeleton. She was naked and had been shot 5 times from behind. 1 bullet was to the back of her head, and 2 had hit her in the back. It appeared she was clutching her head as she fell, and it looked like an execution-style killing, with her having been on her knees and facing away from the gun. A black bra was located near her body, and a few days later, her jeans were discovered 6 miles away. From a missing persons case to a murder mystery, we have this new at 5 tonight. We now know the body of a woman found this weekend in a San Joaquin County cornfield has been identified as Daylene Carlson. We continue to follow this incoming information in this case out of Stockton. KCRA 3's Rich Ibra joins us now from the police department. So Rich, what's next now in this murder investigation? Well, the identification of Daylene Carlson was made through her dental records, and now investigators will have to see how she was killed and link that with any evidence that may lead to her killer. I couldn't believe that everything happened the way it did. I thought that she'd turn up somewhere. I'm glad the family can get some closure finally, but I wish it was under different circumstances. Police said that there were huge inconsistencies in Jason's statements, and despite what his grandma said, his alibi had now been picked apart. She would later admit to lying to police to protect him. They also got a call from someone else close to Jason, saying they knew he owned a gun, and sure enough, the casings found at the crime scene matched that very gun. Cell phone tower data put the pair of them together in the area she was found in, and authorities were confident that Jason had been using Daylene's phone to send messages to people after she was dead. Daylene's aunt said, "I can't conceive why someone would do it to somebody who just wanted to be a friend. She wanted people to like her. She loved people. She was a little social magnet, you know? I can't understand why. I honestly think he probably advanced himself and she probably refused it." The prosecutor added that based off of all of the evidence they had, Jason had convinced Daylene to go to his house, after stopping for some alcohol, possibly offering to drive her home after. But when they got to his house, things took a quick and dark turn. They believe he raped her, grabbed his gun, forced her back into his car, and drove her to the cornfield where he shot her to death. According to text messages, it appeared Jason had spoken to Daylene far more than had been let on. In a 3-day span, he had sent her 200 texts, the final few being on the same day she was last seen. The messages had become more demanding and sexual, including incessant requests for her underwear and photographs of her naked. Daylene would either try to laugh them off and ignore them or just dismiss him outright. He had a real fixation with her, and authorities said the only possible motive for wanting her dead would be because he sexually assaulted her and he knew she would report him. The prosecutor said he killed her because he raped her and he didn't want that information to get out. Why bring the gun to take her home? Because she were never going to take her. What was going through her head when she was being marched in that cornfield? The defendant had Daleen strip and kneel down with her hands behind her head. The prosecution's case was now as strong as it could be, and they had more than 1,000 pages of evidence, and that was without the phone records. Jason Gilley was charged with the kidnap, rape, and murder of Daleen Carlson. We're learning more information tonight about the death of a Stockton woman and the evidence against the man accused of killing her. KCRA 3's Melinda Meza was in court for the second day of hearings to look at the evidence against Jason Gilley. Well, court just wrapped up a short time ago on this day 2 of Jason Gilley's preliminary hearing. Now it's up to a judge to decide if there's enough evidence in this case to go to trial. Gilley is accused of murder, rape, and kidnapping of Daleen Carlson. Because of the special circumstances of the kidnapping and rape, it made him eligible for California's capital punishment. However, back in February 2006, the execution of condemned inmate Michael Morales was temporarily suspended because of his defense claims that California's administration of the lethal injection would subject him to an unnecessary risk of excessive pain, and thus it would violate the Eighth Amendment's prohibition of cruel and unusual punishment. Morales had been on death row since 1983 for the kidnap, rape, and murder of Terry Winchell. This had flowed into other capital punishment cases, and the DA announced they would not be seeking the death penalty, but they were pushing for life without parole given the level of premeditation. His former best friend Robert Cousins said he was disgusted and had completely written him out of his life. When things in the media were tough, Robert let him stay at his house to get away from it all. Everyone had defended him so much because of how adamant he was that he had nothing to do with it. 23-year-old innocent woman. She didn't deserve to die the way she did at all. So why'd you come down here today? To be honest, I want to watch this step by step. I want to see this man go down for what he did to that girl. I got a 5-year-old daughter at home, so I don't feel any sympathy for him or his family, anybody who lied for him, anybody that helped him out. I don't feel sorry for him. How did you know Mr. Gilley? I've known him for 20 years. He was my best friend. His stories changed so many times. I mean, I don't see how people can sit back and look like, if this guy's innocent, why is he continuing to lie? Did you have any interaction with him after Daleen went missing? Yes. Describe that. He had been staying at my house for a couple weeks, just to get away from it all. People coming by his house, bugging him. 20 years I was trying to help him out. How was his demeanor? Cool, calm, and collected, really. He wasn't worried. That's what the eerie part is. Just cool, calm, and collected. Wasn't worried? Not at all. It didn't seem like it at all. I sat him down one night and I asked him, "Did you have anything to do with it? Do you know what happened to her?" He said, "No, I don't know what happened to her." "Has the murder weapon been found?" "We have no murder weapon. We're well within our right to charge personal use of a firearm. We have ballistic evidence. We don't have we have not confirmed that we have the actual weapon itself, but there's ballistic evidence. We have a series of facts, forensic and otherwise, that would allow us to deduce one fact, and that the fact is that she was raped. We'll be put to that test at the preliminary hearing and have a judge determine whether the circumstantial evidence shows that or not. Do you think anyone else was involved?" "Not. In my heart of hearts, I think it was just him. You said you describe yourself as his best friend for all these years." "Yeah." "Are you supporting him now?" "No, I can't support something like that. I can't support it. Just seeing all the facts that are starting to come out, I can't support something like that." As soon as Jason was removed from protective custody and placed in general inmate population, he was beaten up that evening by Daleen's cousin. It was now just over 2 years since Daleen went missing and Jason would go on trial. After numerous different stories, Jason's final one was this. Jason left Finnegan's bar with Daleen. They bought alcohol at the store and he took Daleen back to his house where they slept together. He said Daleen then got angry and wanted to go home, demanding that Jason drive her. He said in the car Daleen called him a piece of garbage and tried to jump out of the moving vehicle, but Jason had locked the doors. He then dropped her off in Modesto, got back on the freeway, and went home. That I can tell you it was emotional for the jury today as they heard closing arguments from the prosecution. But the defense attorney says that cell towers could feed 3 different sites and that all the evidence presented today is circumstantial. Gillies. The defense attorney says Gilly did not kidnap, rape, or kill Daleen. He says he admits to lying, but he says he lied to cover up his sexual relationship with Daleen because that would have been inappropriate to other friends. Now, the defense will continue its side of its closing arguments tomorrow morning, and then Jason Gilly's fate will be in the hands of the jury. Jason Gilly was found guilty of kidnapping and murder. The charge of rape ended in a mistrial. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jason has never admitted what really happened that night. Daleen Carlson had packed up her life to make a huge move. She had big plans and dreams and worked everything out to make sure she fulfilled them. A night out with friends became a horrifying nightmare for the 23-year-old, and one can only imagine how frightening her final moments must have been, begging for her life in a cold, dark field, with no one around to hear or help her. Her Aunt Maggie said in an interview, "It's not that you ever get over it. What helps with healing is remembering the good times, remembering everything that was good when she was alive, because what we did get was great." Like my video and share your thoughts in the comments section. Also share it with your friends and family. Keep supporting and help me reach 1K subscribers.